Hi, I'm Penn State Defensive Coordinator Tom Bradley, and I insisted on wearing my safety glasses today. Being a winner doesn't come easy. In my 30 years of coaching, I've learned that it takes commitment, training, planning, and lots of practice to create a winning team. When you're playing Blaze and stuff, you have no help on a pickoff. It also takes a lot of work. Football players and minors have a lot in common. They both know the value of hard work and a good game plan. Being prepared is a major key to success. In football, we plan how to react to the unexpected pass or offensive alignment. In mining, you must be prepared to react properly in the event of a fire, explosion, or other emergency. In football, we have a game plan. Miners have an emergency response plan. Take the time to learn your mine's evacuation routes and the locations of safe havens, emergency supplies, and rescue breathing devices. Talk with other miners and supervisors. Know what you're going to do before an emergency occurs.
DB's on three, DB's on three. 1, 2, 3, DB!
The Penn State football program salutes hard-working coal miners everywhere. At the end of every shift, we want you to walk out of the mine and go home to your family as a winner, just like we do every Saturday.
Hello everyone, my name is Bill Brown and I want to extend a very warm welcome first of all to those of you here in the audience for today's town hall meeting and also those of you who are watching us on the eventual video and webcast of this special program. As you heard Penn State coach Tom Bradley say, success on the football field is knowing your opponent and then preparing for your opponent. And the same philosophy actually holds true to some extent for those who work in the nation's coal mines. You must know your environment, the dangers and the precautions that you need to take, and then prepare yourself for every possibility. And that's kind of the idea behind this town hall meeting today, to bring you the latest on mine emergency preparedness to the national mining community. And toward that end, we have assembled an impressive panel of experts from just about every aspect of the mining industry, and we will be meeting them and hearing from them very shortly. Our program today was actually the brainchild of the Penn State Miners Training Program, health and safety training outreach to the mining industry. Some of its services include site-specific mandatory training, training materials, and special training initiatives, such as the training program titled, Do You Understand Mine Emergencies?, part of which is being conducted today as a part of this town hall meeting, Escape and Survive. Now, today's meeting is being funded through what is being called the Brookwood Sago Grant. It is a federal grant, training grant authorized by the Miner Act of 2006, I should say. It provides education and training to miners, primarily in the areas of emergency preparedness and response. Now, the purpose of this town hall meeting primarily is to discuss the issues and concerns associated with the implementation of the Miners Act provisions. And the bottom line of all of this today is that we hope the information we provide will above all enhance a miner's ability to escape and evacuate their mine in the case of an emergency. Now at this time I would like to introduce my host, our co-host here today for the town meeting. He is a mining safety expert with Penn State University, and he has worked in virtually every aspect of mining over the years, Mr. Joe DeSalvo.
Thanks,
Joe,
Bill.
good to have you here and good to be working with you. Let's take the opportunity now to introduce our panel to you as well. We will start from my immediate left, starting with Dr. Kathleen Kowalski-Trakoffler. She is a research psychologist, certified mine trainer, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, the Pittsburgh Research Laboratory. Next is Mr. William Ponsaroff, District Manager, District 2, Coal Mine Safety and Health Administration. Next to him is Mr. Jim Pavlik, Safety Director, Amfire Mining Company. Next is Mr. Joseph Main, the Mine Safety Consultant and United Mine Workers of America Safety and Health Administrator, retired. Next is Dr. Raja Romney, Professor Emeritus, Mining Engineering and Industrial Health and Safety at Penn State University. Next is Dr. R. Larry Grayson, Professor, Energy and Mineral Engineering, and George H. Jr. and Ann B. Dykey Chair in Mining Engineering at Penn State University. Next is Mr. David Sheridan, Electrical Safety Division Chief, Approval and Certification Center, Mine Safety and Health Administration. Next is Mr. Jeffrey Stanchek, Emergency Response and Training Manager, Pennsylvania Bureau of Mine Safety. Next is Mr. Michael Burnich Jr., Mining Engineer, Emergency Escape and Response Section, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, Pittsburgh Research Laboratory. And finally, Mr. Thomas McLeod, the Senior Training Specialist, Educational and Policy Development, Mine Safety and Health Administration. Now, at this time, we'd like to introduce two more people to you. They are the producers for this program, the men who are responsible for putting today's program together. First of all, Dr. Mark Radomski. Mark is the director of Penn State's Miner Training Program. And also Joseph Flick, who is the director of Field Services, Penn State Miner Training Program. Thank you, gentlemen.
One of the things that I'd like to talk about is why we're here today. Jim Pavlik, who's on our panel, Jim also comes up and helps me with the classes, and Jim covers first aid, does a fantastic job. And Jim's opening definition of first aid is something that I think applies here today. Jim's definition is information you need to know, but hope you will never have to use. And I think we can apply that information to what we're going to talk about today. I think everybody in this room would agree that this is information that you need to know. And by gosh, we sure hope we never have to use it. What we're going to do today is we're going to go back in time and talk about a little bit about mine rescue, how it's changed. We're going to talk about the new regulations that have gone into effect. We're going to define emergencies and the different types of emergencies, how your knowledge and understanding of those emergencies will help you to make good decisions. And we're going to talk about the subject that is near and dear to me, and to me the key, and that is training. How that helps you prepare to deal with an emergency. And we're very fortunate to have an expert up here who is also going to talk about how you deal with stress. We're going to talk about the key provisions in the ERP. We're also going to talk about some of the new technology in communications. We're going to cover the different types of toxic atmospheres. We were very, very fortunate to have some excellent videos of people donning self-contained self-rescuers underground and switching, which I think is something that is very, very important. We'll also be covering refuge chambers, and we'll also be talking in connection with refuge chambers. We'll also be talking about the stress involved if you go into one of those.
Well, let's begin with something you were talking about, mine emergencies and the history of mine emergencies. In fact, it is, of course, an occupational hazard of the business, like mining. Mine emergencies take generally three basic categories: explosions, inundations, which involve gas or water, and fires. Now, my question to you, Joe, in recent years, there's been several mine emergencies that have attracted national attention. What has been done to enhance mine emergency preparedness and response since the Brockwood and Sago incidents?
Oh, there have been quite a number of things that have been done, and one of the members of our panel, Mike Burnich, I think can help us with that area.
Well, I think when you look at mine emergency response, there have been a lot of changes over the years. The recent events have brought awareness to the fact that we need to be prepared for any type of mine emergency. Whether it be a fire, explosion, water inundation, or what have you. But over the years, we've seen a lot of improvements simply on the mine rescue side as well. We've seen certainly an improvement in breathing apparatus. For a number of years, mine rescue teams used a 2-hour apparatus. We now are using 4-hour self-contained breathing apparatus. We've seen the introduction of improved communication systems. For years, we've used the traditional sound-powered communication system that was developed in the 1940s. Right now, there are several systems on the market that provide constant communications, much just like a regular telephone communication would work, with very high fidelity. And we've also seen the introduction of some very basic kinds of technologies that can help mine rescue teams. For example, lifeline pulleys to aid in moving the lifeline around corners at intersections. We're seeing the use of retractors for gas men to carry on their person for using their gas meters. Also, chemical light sticks that rescue teams can mark specific locations. And if nothing else, we've just seen an overall increase in the sophistication of technologies. For years, rescue teams relied on flame safety lamps, and even in early days, canaries for gas detection. Now we're seeing the use of very sophisticated multi-gas meters. So quite a few changes have happened over the years.
Thank you, Mike.
You've mentioned, Mike, some of the state and federal standards that regulate the industry. The one we're focusing on today, of course, is the Miner Act, the most recent attempt to enhance our ability to cope with mine emergencies. Now, Joe, has this been effective so far in its mission?
I think it has. And we have on the panel someone who is very familiar with the new regulations, and that is Bill Ponceroff. Bill, could you comment on that for us, please?
Yeah, I think the new act has done a good job to prepare companies to make sure that all people are evacuated in the event of emergency. And it's also provided a way that if those people are trapped, they can be protected or sustained till rescue teams can get to them. The major focus of this is the emergency response plan. The companies develop this, and the agency reviews that every 6 months. The importance of that is it's like any other disaster preparedness program. It allows you to act very swiftly and expediently and accurately in the event of emergency. The law also deals with post-accident communications, and this is so that it can be electronically detected from the surface in case the communications are damaged. The miners can still be directed toward the way out of the mines. Also, the law directs post-accident tracking, and that's important to know where the people were. And once an accident occurs, they're not going to stand still, they're going to be moving. And this helps not only direct them, but also your mine rescue team locate them and help them come to the surface. Additional self-contained self-rescuers, both when they're traveling into the mine, they have one on them and there's one available as they travel in and out. The new law also provides for caches. They have those caches on the way out about every 30 minutes walking distance. They can exchange those. The lifelines is another extremely important part of this law. If you remember Aracoma, there was a fatal, one of the guys perished due to using the high voltage line. One went one way and one went the other. One wanted to thought that the way out was in by, the other out by. One guy perished because of that, and they'll be covered. It's a good thing. It really allows miners to escape in an expedient manner. And then if you get trapped and you're barricaded and you can't get out of the mine, there are emergency shelters that's being provided, and there's air there for approximately 96 hours, food, water, some medical supplies. The law also provides for new mine rescue laws and preparation of teams for each mine.
Thank you, Bill.
Joe, we touched on it briefly here just a moment ago, the types of mine emergencies, but if you would like to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, because there are several different types and reaction of people varies. Dr. Romney, could you expand on the types of mine emergencies that we have?
Mine emergency is an unforeseen happening in a mine or an unforeseen combination of circumstances resulting in conditions that threaten the lives of miners, property, or both. Emergencies, if not controlled, can become disasters. Examples of recent emergencies that became disasters or Sago explosion, Alma mine fire, Crandall Canyon massive ground collapse. An example of a mine emergency that had a very happy ending was the Q Creek non-fatal mine inundation, which was caused by large volumes of water coming into the mine. According to MSHA regulations, a number of emergencies are identified: explosions or ignitions of gas and dust, like the one you are seeing on the screen there, which is the coal dust explosion at a Bureau of Mines experimental mine in 1960. There are mine fires, inundations of water and gas, massive collapse of ground, massive failure of equipment such as mine fans, mine hoists, etc. What you are looking at on the screen there is the Mariana mine explosion in 1908 in Pennsylvania. We also have a slide of the Farmington mine explosion in 1968. The 1969 Health and Safety Act was in the works, but this explosion caused the imminent passage of those regulations. We also have an example of a mine inundation there. You can see the big whirlpool where the Susquehanna River drained into the Knox mine, which is a deep underground anthracite mine. This mine inundation ended up causing railroad cars taken into the mine. So the characteristics of a mine emergency is they are very sudden, there's a large and violent release of energy. These can result in toxic atmospheres or atmospheres that are deficient in oxygen. And that's a reason why we want to control mine emergencies.
Thank you, Dr. Romney.
Joe, how important is it that a miner recognizes the different types of a mine emergencies that Dr. Romney just explained? And does that save him time? Does that help him in an emergency situation?
Well, what it really does is it gives him the opportunity to make good decisions. If he recognizes what's happening, and we'll cover this a little bit later in our program, but if he recognizes what's happening, then he can have a good reaction to it.
Okay, how about the importance of training then in that respect?
As I mentioned earlier, and what I do for Penn State is training, so that's kind of my favorite subject area. Yes, it is. To me, that is the key, is training that helps you with the ability to cope with the stress. And when it comes to training, I would appreciate if we could have Tom McLeod comment on that.
Sure. One of the things that MSHA has done to better prepare miners is require scenarios during the quarterly drills. These scenarios not only give a miner a different picture of a situation, but allows them to make some decisions. And hopefully in the event of a real emergency, these scenarios that have been practiced quarterly will allow these miners to make quick decisions, make correct decisions, enable them to get out of the mine a lot faster than maybe they have in the past.
Thank you. And along with the training, I think miners need to learn how to deal with the stress involved in being in that situation in the first place. And Kathleen, you've done a lot of work on that area, haven't you?
Yes, and actually in a disaster, preparation is the most important element from a psychological perspective. If miners, command center personnel, mine rescue people, families in the community know what to expect and most importantly what to do, it can lessen some of the longer-term psychological effects. Preparation means exactly that: training, training, training. Training and providing information on the psychological aspects, the psychological human response in an emergency. We do a very good job in the mining industry of training people and preparing miners on the technology needed. For example, we train miners on donning SCSRs. We talk to them about lifelines. But what happens to individuals when they are in a situation of escape or they're in a command center in a crisis situation. There are normal human responses that we need to be teaching our miners beforehand. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Okay, on this subject, we do have an actual discussion about safety and preparation and training in the case of an emergency.
Leroy, Greg, Ed, thanks for stopping by. We're coming in small little groups just to have a refresher type of discussion. We'll call this a toolbox talk, but it is dealing with our evacuation and a firefighting program. It's a matter of life and death that we know this information. And above all others, our primary objective in a crisis is that we evacuate this mine. We gather together, we're doing head counts, we're able to evacuate the mine. That's our first priority. Where is our rendezvous meeting point? Where is our emergency assembly point?
At our feeder, the
Right,
dumping.
at the dump point, at the feeder. That is true. And where do our lifelines begin?
Right there at the feeder, at the back, Jeff.
And also behind where the power center is.
A quick review of the phone system here. It's a redundant phone system, meaning there are two separate phone lines going into the mine. Our main phone line is on entry number 5, which is also our secondary escapeway. And secondary phone line that we're using is on primary escapeway, which is on intake air number 6. And the thing about the phones we're saying they're redundant, is that there are two separate phone lines. In the event of a crisis, one can pick up if the other one goes down.
At the next meeting, can we talk about the location of rescuers?
Oh, definitely, Ed. In fact, thanks for the idea. We'll make a point to do that. We'll definitely talk about their locations, certainly where you have them, certainly about the one you carry, and about where the caches are stored on our escape routes. So, thanks a bunch for coming in. I didn't want to take up much of your time. I wanted to say, I think, what you already knew. Thanks for confirming to me that you did know that. But it is so important that everybody in our mind know what to do in the event of a crisis.
Now, we heard Tom Bradley talk earlier about the importance of a game plan in football. I would assume that an emergency response plan is the game plan for miners.
Yes, it is. One of our panel members, Jim Pavlik, who is safety director for AmFire, has had quite a bit of experience with writing the plans and doing some revisions on them. Jim, could you talk a little bit from your experience with the ERP plans?
Yeah, I can, Joe. Thank you. Safety director of a mining company confronted with the many challenges to comply with the requirements of the new Miner Act. And I felt very fortunate to have been part of the Pennsylvania mine rescue system because that system required mining companies to have an emergency response plan. So what I was able to do was to look at what I considered 4 major parts of the Miner Act in relationship to emergency response plans, ERPs. The first one being communications and tracking. And what we did, the same as many of the smaller mining companies in this area, we took a look at that and said, well, we really would like to go wireless, as mentioned earlier. We did the dual phone lines. We have a main phone line in our intake, primary escapeway, and a secondary escapeway. We also have a dedicated phone line. I think that's important because that's daily use. And no matter what kind of system the mining industry eventually ends up with, I think it's important that it's a system that's used daily, because we can train annually, we can train quarterly, we can train daily. But when the people actually use the systems that they're presented with, that's when they'll know what to do with them in a time of an emergency. Tracking, my mining company, we have 5 underground mines. We're currently using what we're calling zones. As people leave one work area to go to another work area, they go to one of the phones, either on the primary or on the secondary of the belt line, and they call out to an outside attendant and notify him what zone they're going to be working in. Post-accident breathable air. Looked at that in several different aspects. The working section. How are we going to provide post-accident breathable air for the individuals on the section? Of course, they all are going to have the 1-hour SCSR wearable or hand carried. In addition to that, we would provide one additional 1-hour unit for them, readily available unit. Those are on the mobile equipment. The 96 hours, how would we provide that? We thought about the barricade method, and we finally ended up with a shelter. could have also done a safe haven, but it's pretty hard as fast as some of our sections move to ever have anything as permanent as a safe haven. So we therefore went back to the shelter. We will be providing post-accident breathable air in the section by shelter. Out by people, how are we going to provide 96 hours of breathable air for the out by people, those people that don't normally work in the working section? And there we had the same opportunities. We could provide barricade materials on a barricade skid with post-accident breathable air. We could provide a shelter type or a safe haven. There again, we opted a little bit differently. Rather than a shelter, we're going to go with a barricade skid in that particular circumstance. The SCSR training, I tell you, it's just night and day. From when we were doing it as part of our annual retraining, now we do it quarterly. Just a major difference with what we see and how the employees are more comfortable donning the unit. And the expectation training that we now do annually, where they actually physically can put on that SCSR and see what it was like to breathe through it.
You went into a lot more detail, I think, than I was aware of. And Kathleen?
I just wanted to add that it's very important when we're training miners to don the SCSRs that we include human expectations training. For example, in many of the units, the hoses are packed with talc. So when the miner first puts the unit into their mouth, they cough, and they will cough for a period of time. If they don't know that, they're likely to say, this unit doesn't work. And there are other expectations of the units that we need to be training our miners on.
Do emergency response plans, they need to be submitted and updated? Mr. Ponsroff, is that right?
The mines are dynamic and they change. They're growing. Sometimes areas are being sealed. Escape ways change due to the locations of the mines being sealed and developed. You have new technology also coming in, and the law made provisions that, just like Jim was saying, the wireless communication systems aren't developed yet, but the law allows for that through technology advances. And it's important that people change, mines change, technology changes, that we continuously update these plans.
Okay, I think we have a video clip that actually speaks to that, if we could take that now.
Okay, Leroy, what we have here, we got the ERP back from MSHA, and now they want to try to change a couple things. What they want to do here, they want to try looking at our breathable air underground. Okay, if something would happen. Okay, they want to try to make shelters and get shelters put underground that the men can actually get into, and we'll have breathable air in these shelters that if there is no way out and we have to go to the barricade type deal, that then we can get into these shelters.
Okay,
and
so we would still have our supply carts that we right now have in there for barricade stuff would be...
It'll still be in there. It'll be left in there like always. You'll still have your emergency supplies with you like always. It's just that these here will be actual self-contained units that's big enough to have like a crew go into, and you have your breathable air in these units and you can lock them down and you'll be safe in there until you can be rescued. And you'd go that route this time.
Okay, that sounds good.
We have, during the preparation for this miners' town meeting, we did ask within the industry for certain questions, perhaps some issues that we might not cover. And we have one question now that I would like to direct to David Sheridan. David, how do you see the communications and miner tracking requirements of the Miner Act being implemented after the June 2009 deadline?
The technology that's been available to underground coal mines and all underground mines prior to the Sago and Aracoma accidents was old technology. The Miner Act, which was implemented in 2006, requires that mines by June 2009 implement wireless two-way communications and electronic tracking. There's been a lot of discussion about what wireless means. Wireless does not mean no wires, it only means less wires. So that's one of the challenges we've been facing. Fully wireless technology we do not anticipate being commercially available by June of 2009. So we anticipate taking a phased-in approach to implementation of the communication and tracking requirements of the Miner Act. Some of those advantages that wireless offers that some of the newer technologies can also offer is increased survivability, and I think that's what the Miner Act was trying to get at. The new systems that we're seeing, such as leaky feeder, can also provide improved coverage in underground mines. They are doing more with leaky feeder now to provide increased coverage in underground mines and to increase the survivability of that technology. So I do expect that it will be a phased-in approach.
We have a video clip now that also addresses this issue.
Hey guys, we got a CO monitor going off at 7 Mains Head.
Inside. Randy or Greg? Randy or Greg? To inside.
Yeah, we got trouble down there at 7-1 Head.
Greg, we have trouble with 7 number 1 head. The COs are going off. Get the guys out by and let them know.
We got some more COs that just went off down the belt line. You want to run down there and check it out? Just be careful.
Randy, we have trouble. The COs are going off at 7 number 1 head. Get your guys together at the feeder right away.
Okay, I'll get my crew.
All right, let's talk about another issue for miners underground, emergency situations, toxic atmospheres. In a mining emergency, there could be several types of toxic atmospheres, including smoke, a lack of oxygen, which is also known as black damp, and carbon monoxide. Now, Joe, how do miners prepare in advance for the possibility of any of those?
Well, when you're an underground coal miner and you're dealing with a toxic atmosphere, basically what you're talking about is putting on your self-contained self-rescuer.
Joe, Ed! Yeah! Joe, Ed, get over here! What's wrong? Got a CO monitor going off out by the section. We've got on our SCSRs.
And now they're ready to exit the mine. Mike, could you make some additional comments?
Yeah, I can, Joe. I think when you looked at that dawning video, I've trained literally thousands of miners all over the country to put on SCSRs, and that right there, that's the textbook way to do it. Those miners were very confident putting that SCS on. They were very proficient, and that's because they've had repeated hands-on practice in that dawning procedure. That SCSR is one of your key components to a successful mine escape, and every miner has to know how to put that unit on, how to put it on proficiently. And the only way to do that is repeated practice. repeated practice, not only initially when they're first trained, but now we have the required every 90-day or quarterly training on the SCSR. But miners have to think about some other things as well. Once you successfully don that SCSR, as my colleague Kathleen Trackoffler had mentioned, there are certain things miners need to know about in terms of expectations. One is that you have to keep that SCSR on even when you think you have reached clear air, because even in clear air, you can have CO or other harmful gases in that atmosphere and you may not be aware of it. Once you've donned that SCSR, there's going to be breathing resistance associated with the unit simply by design of the internal components. And as you use that SCSR, as time goes on, that breathing resistance starts to increase, but that is normal for any SCSR out there on the market. If it becomes harder to breathe from that SCSR, miners just simply need to slow their pace down so that the SCSR can keep up with their oxygen demand. When you breathe from an SCSR, that unit is going to get warm. In fact, some units may even get hot simply because of the chemical reactions that take place in the oxygen-producing beds and or the carbon dioxide scrubber beds. But the important point for miners to remember, as long as you can breathe from that SCSR, that apparatus is working. I've worn every apparatus out there, and I've gotten at least 62, 63 minutes out of any apparatus. And believe me, folks, when the SCSR is out of oxygen and it stops, you cannot draw another breath from it. So I think some important points miners need to keep in mind.
And there is one thing that I would like to clarify that you saw in that video, and that was at the beginning when the foreman picked up the phone and was notified that the monitor had gone off. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were going to exit the mine immediately. Normally, they would have someone check that area. They would go into more detail before they would start to exit. And I just wanted to clarify that as part of the video.
Okay, well, donning the SCSR is, of course, the first step in our next topic, which is escape and evacuation. And Joe, am I wrong? Exiting the mine safely is the #1 priority. Is that right?
There's absolutely no doubt about that. You need, in the case of an emergency, to do your very best to get out of the mine. And Dr. Grayson, maybe you could help us with that?
First of all, I would like to note that all of your training, your drills, and your experience of your career, if done faithfully, all come together and pay off at this point in time. Escape is of the utmost. So all of your knowledge on escapeways, your ventilation system, intake, return, etc., using SCSRs properly and donning them properly, switching, we'll talk about later, and your expectations in these various emergency scenarios you're going to be trained on all come together. So once communication is given by the authorized person, or if communication fails, you make a decision because of the conditions that you're going to escape. Then you gather together, everybody in your particular area or section, if you're on a section, account for everyone who is there. Then finally, you go ahead and don the SCSRs as you saw earlier. It's a good idea to check each other. Assess the situation next. If you were on the phone and you understand what that situation is and where the fire may be, you have an advantage. If you don't, you still have to assess the situation, see where the smoke's most heavily, etc., and then select your escape route, primary, alternate escape way. If at all possible, if you can take your man trip and save time or some other vehicle, and they have SCSRs on them, then you by all means want to do that. If you don't think that's the safest route to go with some sort of a man trip, then you're going to have to pick the escape way, either again primary or alternate, and select that one, and then proceed to the escape way. There's a few things you want to do. You want to take the additional SCSRs with you. You want to take the tether with you. And it's also advisable to take the escape way map with you. All of these should be quickly gatherable. If it can't be done quickly, then you may have to, for instance, let the escape way map go. But you got to pick the best, most practical, quickest escape way out of the mine. Of course, you've got the caches every 30 minutes. So there's your backup, your safety factor. If possible, along the way, and many of the primary and alternate escapeways do have communication systems in them, then you need to communicate, first of all, immediately, if at all possible, who's leaving, what condition everyone's in, what observations you have in your situation there, where you're located. Once you go into the escapeway, grab the directional lifeline. You'll see a video here in just a little bit to see exactly how that directs you out the escapeway. It's at the beginning of your escape route. Usually the foreman will go in front, but that's not necessarily always true. Sometimes there's a natural leader. As mentioned earlier, I think it was by Mike, regulate your travel speed. Very important. Again, you have SESRs 30 minutes away. So progress as far as practical in your chosen escapeway. Now, if you run into conditions that worsen quite a bit, or you end up with blocks somewhere from falls or something like that, then you may have to change your escapeway. If you have a chance as you escape in the other escapeway, of course you want to report the change of location. Eventually you're going to get to the next cache of SESRs. And once you get to that second cache, then it's time to switch your SESRs, and there's a very specific procedure that needs to be used to ensure that you maintain your breathing system.
Thank you, Larry. Mike, if I could pass this to you. You and I have had some discussions about escaping and how important it is not to wait around for someone to come get you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Joe. You don't want to wait. As soon as you've confirmed that there is a problem, as Larry mentioned, you gather the people together, gather your equipment, your SCSRs, and start your egress out of that mine, whatever route that might be.
Thank you.
Okay, well, as Mr. Grayson pointed out, we were talking about lifelines and SCSR switching. We have a video clip, actually, that addresses that as well.
Units to the fellows that are with them. Again, you'll see them taking off the top, taking off the bottom. And the key here when you're switching is to make sure that you have that unit prepared to make that switch, ready to go before you start the actual switch. You see them there loosening up the neck strap, making sure things are ready to use. He's got that one ready to go. He's got it inflated. He's removed the mouthpiece. Now he's putting in the mouthpiece of the second unit, putting the nose clips on. He's releasing the waistband on the first unit, tightening up the neck strap on the second unit. Now he's got the waist strap tightened up, got his hat on, and he's ready to escape. And Mike, you're one of the people that developed this procedure?
Yeah, I was one of two people back at NIOSH in Pittsburgh that were charged back in, I believe it was April of 2006, to develop a switchover procedure for switching from one SCSR to another. It's not so much of an issue if you're switching from one unit to the same type of unit. But we know that there are a lot of mines out there that commingle two or more different models of SCSR. So when you train people to make that switchover, you have to be very, very careful to make sure that they clearly understand how to do it. So miners, they need to learn and practice that SCSR switchover procedure for every model of SCSR that there is at their facility. And until they are capable of successfully making the switchover that you saw just now in the video, you couldn't do it any better than that. There's no two ways in my mind about that. Keep in mind, though, those miners were in clear air. You're in smoke-laden air where you might have 1 or 2 feet of visibility. It's going to be an even harder task. The most important point I think Joe made is for miners to be successful in getting that SCSR switched over to the second unit, have that second unit opened up, ready to go. You're already under air from that first apparatus, so your lungs are isolated. Take that second unit, open it up completely, lay out the neck straps, lay out the waist straps, anything else that you may need to lay out, goggles included, have that unit ready to go so that when you begin that switchover procedure to that second unit, it's going to go fairly smoothly. As Larry also mentioned, miners must be cognizant of where their SCSR caches are located. We know that they're 30 minutes, they're supposed to be 30 minutes apart according to law. What I teach miners when training them on SCSRs, once you're under air on your SCSR, take a look at your watch, see what time it is. So that when you reach that next cache of SCSRs, you probably should have been under air about 30 minutes. And I agree with Larry, it's time to change when you reach that next cache of SCSRs. That way you make sure that you're going to have a continuous supply of oxygen.
Okay. Some of the training that we have seen has been underground, but there is also a high-tech way now for miners to train without having to be underground. Is that right, Joe?
Yes, there is, and especially for mine rescue teams. NIOSH developed over the years a program called the Merits Program, and we have a video of a man from NIOSH who did a lot of the development.
NIOSH has developed a computer program called Merits. Merits stands for Mine Emergency Response Interactive Training Simulation. Its purpose is to be a PC-based equivalent to a mine emergency response drill. MERDs, while very effective, are also costly in time and resources. The goal of Merits was to provide a PC-based alternative that was low cost and convenient because you could execute this training at a time and place of your choosing. What Merits does is it puts you in the hot seat of the command center when an emergency occurs underground. Ideally, you respond to the emergency by following your emergency response plan. During this event, you react to simulated events and simulated people in an underground mine. This tends to immerse you into the training and has been proven by immersing someone into an event, they learn more and they retain it better. Unfortunately, since Merits has come out, the internet has become a lot more hostile place, making some of the components of Merits unreliable and unstable. NIOSH is currently working on a new version of Merits that will have improvements to the simulation and make it run more effectively on today's hardware. Another training innovation being used by NIOSH and other trainers in the mining community is called virtual reality, or VR. VR is gaining momentum as an effective training tool, especially for today's younger miners. VR puts the trainee in a virtual mine. It not only allows experience in the environment, but through design of the software, challenges the trainee to make good decisions and perform fundamental tasks while underground. During the redesign of the Merits program, we're also building hooks for virtual reality. The virtual reality component will be for the rescue team. We will then have a tool that will train command center personnel and rescue team personnel at the same time. Not only will they get to practice their specific duties, they will get to practice communicating with each other. This will improve the realism of the training and provide a tool to make them better prepared for handling the real event.
Greg has briefly described the program. What I know is a little about the practical application of it, and that is that when the mine rescue teams were at Q Creek. And after that was all over and they were asked about how things went for them, they gave a lot of credit to their efficiency to the training of that merits program. Now, I have personal experience with their virtual reality program on map reading, and be glad to talk to anybody about that. My experience with it is that new miners that I've worked with, what took me 6 months to learn about getting around underground, they can actually do, we can do it in a classroom in about 2.5 hours. So NIOSH also has a great virtual reality program out there. Let's expand on what we're talking about as far as mine rescue, and let's go to a longtime mine rescue person, Joe Main.
Well, in terms of mine rescue, things have changed over the last few months as a result of the new Miner Act that just went into effect. And it was a time in the history of mining that those changes were needed. The new mine regulations are going to beef up the number of mine rescue teams, which has been critical in our country. We had been in decline with the decline in the number of mines that were in existence. And the quality of training is going to increase. And this is important too at a time when we're changing out our workforce in the mines. A lot of the older, experienced mine rescue workers are departing, going into retirement, and the mine rescue teams are being replenished with younger generation of miners that doesn't have the kind of background experience that new miners have. You know, and these are important changes to be taking place at this time. In terms of facilities for training miners, miners need to, that are on rescue teams, need to have a realistic view of what a mine is to actually conduct a training. And there's very few of those facilities that are available in the country. One of the most predominant is at the EMSH Academy at Beckley, West Virginia. And there's one that I'm working with actually that's in a process of being constructed similar to that. It's going to be located at Rough Creek, Pennsylvania. Miners depend on mine rescue teams that are well-trained, well-equipped, and ready to rock and roll if a mine disaster or a mine accident occurs and they become entrapped. So it is very critical that we invest in the training and the upgrading of these mine rescue teams.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, earlier we talked about the number one priority of someone trapped underground at getting an escape. The last resort, of course, at least as I am told, is barricading. And my question now to Jeff Stanchek. Jeff, under what circumstances would miners build a barricade?
Well, Bill, once again, I want to emphasize the necessity for the miners to make every attempt to get to fresh air. However, there are times and circumstances when the escape routes are cut off. For example, as Dr. Romani says, water inundations from an old mine, or when the escape ways have been physically blocked by fire or by a fire and explosion. At this point, the miners must now evacuate to a pre-designated area according to their emergency response plan where they can barricade. Now, the barricades have three basic designs. One is a portable skid with the barricading materials such as canvases, Bradish block, extra SCSRs, bottles of oxygen and air to provide for the 96 hours of breathable air required by the Miner Act. The only concern on this plan is this barricade has to be physically constructed quickly and airtight by the trapped miners. Now, if the miners are injured or disoriented, as you can see, this may hamper their efforts to get into the breathable atmosphere. It also should be noted that the miners should be familiar with all the barricade signals that are usually on a sticker inside their hard hat. The basic signals are, once they're inside this barricade, they should listen for 3 surface shots which are put off on the surface. They should pound hard 10 times on the floor or roof with a hammer or a prop. Then they rest 15 minutes. They repeat the sequence. Once they hear those 5 shots from the surface, that means the people on the surface have located the area of the mine which they're at. The other 2 systems in the mines is the inflatable shelter and the hardened shelter. These are basically in a metal box to withstand the pressures of a mine explosion. The inflatable one is pre-designed to sit in a certain area of the mine. The problem with this is if there's any roof falls, you can see what happens to these. The third one is the hardened shelter. These are a little bit more rigid and they can withstand more impacts. Now all these chambers, once again, have drinking water, food, first aid supplies, and oxygen to withstand the 96 hours of wait. Now the trapped miners must be aware that rescue efforts can be a long and laborious task. Mine rescue teams and surface drill rigs, if they are called out, have to be assembled, they have to be briefed before any type of rescue effort can be made.
How about the psychological impact of knowing that you are trapped and now you're barricading yourself and preparing for what you hope is a rescue? How can someone cope with that?
Well, the introduction of refuge chambers has created new concerns for miners. There is no question about that. And again, preparation is valuable, and preparation means training. We need to take a look at judgment and decision-making skills. NIOSH is presently developing some training materials looking at helping miners on making judgments as to when it is appropriate to go into a chamber. We also need to train our miners to learn about group behavior and issues of confinement. There are normal human responses, as I mentioned before, when you're in a situation where you're under stress. And those responses can include physical responses such as dry mouth, anxiety, sweating, confusion, the sense of being overwhelmed, difficulty breathing, and sometimes even nausea. These are ordinary reactions, and it's important that our miners are trained to understand what their psychological reactions will be. So that gets back to what we were talking about earlier in expectations training. Command center personnel, company officials, families in the community, everyone is affected by a mine disaster from a psychological perspective. It is necessary for us to provide appropriate crisis intervention, psychological services, and follow-up for at least 6 months after a disaster. Research has shown that that 6-month period is when suicides related to disasters begin to occur. It's also important to remember that people are individuals and their reactions will vary. On scene, what can you do? Maintaining adequate nutrition, hydration, and rest is essential to well-being. This is especially true in the command center where critical decisions are being made. For mine rescue teams, patience is important and useful. For escaping miners, focusing on getting out, thinking forward, thinking what it will be like when you get out is important. When a disaster is over, it is not over from a psychological standpoint. In some cases, it is just beginning.
Thank you, Kathleen. I think that's definitely an area that we just let slide in the past, that we definitely need to pay more attention to now than we did before.
I would agree with you. We've learned a lot in the research in the last number of years, particularly since 9/11, and we need to be able to apply what we've learned in the mining industry.
Thank you.
Let's touch on one more area here, and that is anthracite mines. They are common to northeastern Pennsylvania, of course, mostly smaller companies, and they employ unique mining methods. I want to ask Jeffrey Stanchek again, do they also require kind of unique emergency preparedness?
There's about 14 anthracite mines working at any given time, located on the very northeastern part of Pennsylvania. Usually, there are small operations consisting of less than 10 miners per mine, and the work there is usually very labor-intensive without mechanical means, mostly all hand labor. And the other thing about these mines is they are not set up like the bituminous fields, where they're on the flat horizontal. These are almost sometimes in the 90-degree pitch. So in order to get the coal, they have to drill and shoot, and they have to go up several hundred feet up these, what they call stopes. Now, the problem there, once again, as you can see, if something happens underground, these miners are up in those regions up there, and that's where their escape has to come from. So as you can see, the hardened shelters, the inflatable shelters are really not to their advantage. The problem is, more than likely, they will have equipment stored underground to build their barricade situations as needed, depending on the rescue attempt.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. We've asked a lot of questions here and covered a lot of ground, and what we'd like to do now is we would like to ask the people who are here today at our town hall meeting if they have any questions that they would like to ask. And if you do, please come up to the microphone right here and ask your question. You can direct them to anyone on our panel specifically or just in general.
Yes, sir. My name is Craig McKnight, and I'd like to ask Dr. Romney, how can miners trapped in a hostile atmosphere keep track of each other?
We are talking about tracking miners, and this has been a miner tracking another miner, or people on the surface tracking miners underground. So tracking of miner by another miner requires development of new technology. I think this is an area of both research and development. I, in fact, was reading a speech by MSHA Assistant Secretary that this device is still under development. That's going to be a challenging task.
Anyone else?
Question, Bill, if you would answer. Mr. Ponceroff, what are your thoughts or opinions on pressurizing a primary escapeway to prevent leakage of smoke from the belly return? For example, for using maybe a parachute stopping.
Yeah, the primary escapeway is the safest, most direct, practical route. That's why it's called the primary. And it's important because that's where all your mobile equipment travel to. It's the fastest way out. We've had 30 belt fires in the last 10 years, reportable many others. If that smoke, which is very toxic, gets over into the intake, it can very easily cause that rapid egress to come to a halt, and they'd have to get off, use the lifeline, have a difficult time escaping.
Okay. Anyone?
Hello, panel. My name's Nancy Dorsett. I am an ex-miner and now the coordinator of the Mining Technology Program at Penn State Fayette. One of my concerns with the shelters are, and I deal with some of the mines in West Virginia where the shelters are being required much earlier than the MSHA law, is are we going to be required to put those people in those refuges and leave them for 8 hours or something so they get a good idea of what type of things might happen when they're in them? Some of the things that Kathleen addressed. Because I got a feeling if they don't get a chance to really experience it, it's going to be, I've got to get out of here. And they're not going to be safe in the way that they get out.
I think you make a very good point, and I think that's very important. One of the focuses today, and I've heard every panel member discuss training. And spending time in a refuge chamber, hands-on for a number of hours, is going to be important. As a researcher, I think it's an important issue to look at so that we know what some of the responses will be. And actually, NIOSH has put together a protocol to look at human subjects in a refuge chamber down the road.
Bill, do you expect to see anything like that in the response plan, emergency response plans training program?
If it gets down to where you know you can't get out and that's what's going to sustain you, that's where people will end up. But as far as allowing someone to go in, we would agree with that, but I don't believe we would require it. It would take legislation to do that.
There is a plan to do some human testing, and I believe NIOSH is going to embark on that in the fairly near future. That'll certainly give us some insights, Nancy, on how pronounced that problem may be. I think we'll learn a lot from that.
Okay, did we have one more with a question? Yes.
Another question for Mr. Grayson. The Edgar Mine Facility MERD training has been approved by MSHA as meeting the local contest requirements. What others are there in the U.S.?
Actually, besides the one at Edgar Mine at Colorado School of Mines, which is about 20 miles roughly away from Golden, away from the main campus, there's another MSHA conducted, actually, mine rescue training and contest that occurs at let's see, they changed their name, Missouri University of Science and Technology. It used to be University of Missouri-Rolla. And that's the only other one I know that does something similar to that, and they're certainly prepared to be able to do mine rescue training, just like the Academy is or someone else.
Okay. It's time to summarize now. Joe, do you have something? Just want to touch on the key points that we cover here today?
Well, the only way that I really know how to describe the key points that we've been talking about is to use Kathleen's words, which were training, training, and training. I think that's the key, and I think everybody on the panel will agree with me on that. That's the key. We've got the laws in place. We've got to make sure the training is done and it's done properly.
We want to thank our audience who turned out today for the live town hall meeting, and we want to thank those of you who are viewing us now, possibly on the web, for participating as well. My name is Bill Brown. It was my pleasure to be your host here today, and as we close today, we earlier introduced you to our two producers. They share something else besides just being producers of this program. They also both lost their grandfathers to tragic mining accidents. And so we close today with memorial clips from each of them talking about their grandfathers. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm Mark Radomski. I'm the director of the miner training program at Penn State. Coal mining has been important to our economy and also to my family. My grandfather was killed in a mining accident in 1924. And what I have here is a record of that accident. It's a ledger that the mine inspector kept and recorded the fatalities. He was killed when he was riding on a car, and he was caught between the car and the rib. He was 55 years old, and he left 9 children. So it has been a rather hazardous occupation, but we've made great progress through working together, through teamwork, through the regulations, and I believe that each year we'll get safer and safer as long as everybody's doing their part.
I'm Joe Flick. I'm with the Miner Training Program at Penn State University. It's my sincerest hope that all miners everywhere will take their safety very seriously and at the end of the day go home to their loved ones. I'm holding my grandfather's carbide light. He was killed in a mining accident. I keep this on my desk and I think of him often. I wish the very best for each and every one of you, and may your days all be safe ones. Take care of yourself and each other out there.